Today on The Hookup, we're gonna figure out if you can get a robotic vacuum that does it all for under $500. I've been using the Neebot Nomo and the Ecovacs T8 with auto empty base for a little over 4 months now, and I'm ready to make my final judgment. Look, there are a lot of videos on YouTube about robotic vacuums. In most of those videos, they throw sand, rice, or Cheerios on the floor, and they judge the vacuums based on how much they pick up. Given that both of these vacuums have auto-empty bases, I've decided to do a little more of a real-world test. So I used them daily in my house for a little over 4 months, and I saved and labeled all of the dust and debris that they collected. If watching a grown man pick through and analyze a month of dust isn't your thing, then you might want to skip this video. But in my opinion, the results were super interesting. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way. In my semi-expert opinion, there are a few robotic vacuum features that you should never go without. For the most accurate maps and navigation, the vacuum should have a spinning laser on top called LiDAR. The app should let you place no-go lines and zones easily. The roller brush should resist tangles and be easy to maintain. And the robot should have an adequate object avoidance system to prevent scuffing of your furniture and baseboards. One new feature that I've added to my list of must-haves is an auto-empty base that sucks out the contents of the dustbin after each cleaning. Both of these vacuums tick all those boxes. In my opinion, other features like mopping and multi-floor mapping are significantly less helpful since they require you to babysit your vacuum while they work, which violates my first and most important rule of robotic vacuums. You should not have to interact with your robotic vacuum. In the interest of transparency, I should mention that Neebot sent me this early unit of their Neebot Nomo for review in October, and it had a rough first 2 weeks where it would just randomly stop in its cleaning cycle. I just about sent it back to Neebot and told them that I wasn't interested since it clearly didn't follow my first rule of robotic vacuum cleaners. But they told me they were aware of the issue and it was going to be fixed in software. After a firmware update in early November, my Neebot has performed pretty flawlessly since then. I did spend my own money for the Ecovacs T8 with auto empty bin, which I got on sale at Best Buy in early December for $459. But at the same time, the Neebot Nomo was on sale for $399, so it seems like you're always going to pay at least a little bit more for the T8. I don't do sponsored reviews, so you're going to hear my honest thoughts, both good and bad, about both vacuums. This video is sponsored by PCBWay.com. If you're a tinkerer, inventor, or maker and you haven't checked out PCBWay, you are seriously missing out. They obviously produce full-featured printed circuit boards with a ton of different materials and options, but now they offer basically everything you need to turn your ideas into a physical reality. Whether you need 3D printing, injection molding, CNC machining, assembly, or just plain old PCB manufacturing, PCBWay can do it all for highly competitive prices. Check out PCBWay's awesome services using the link in the description to support this channel. Let's start by looking at the vacuums themselves. The Neebot Nomo has an all-white glossy finish and a white base. On top of the robot, you can see the spinning LiDAR sensor giving it an overall height of about 9.5 centimeters. The Neebot has 2 side brushes and 1 main roller brush, which has a great design. It's the only roller brush that I've ever seen that can be completely disassembled on both sides to remove hair tangles, and I hope that other brands take note of this design. Flipping it back over, there are 2 cutouts on the front and side for infrared collision sensors and infrared cliff sensors on the underside. The Neebot doesn't have mopping and can therefore dedicate more space to its bin, which is fairly large and pulls out from the back. But the dustbin size isn't all that important since it should be emptied automatically every time the vacuum returns to the base. Speaking of the base, the Neebot's charging base is 35 centimeters tall, and Neebot recommends allowing at least 12 inches on either side of the base to allow the vacuum to dock easily. But I haven't had any problems with my setup where it has just over an inch on either side since the Neebot's docking protocol is really precise. Inside the base is a vacuum bag that Neebot recommends replacing every 2 to 4 weeks, but your replacement schedule will ultimately depend on how much dust, hair, and debris you have in your house, and pet owners should expect to be on the lower end. The Neebot empties its bin through a single opening on the bottom of the robot, and it does so by backing in first, emptying the bin, and then spinning around to start charging. The Neebot auto empty process is really loud, and it's been dubbed the jet engine by my family. But it does a great job emptying the bin and only struggle to remove really heavy objects from the bin. Moving over to the Ecovacs T8, which is functionally the same as their highest end robot, the T8 AI-VI, but without the front-facing camera and AI object avoidance. It has a gray and black finish on both the robot and the base, and it has a slightly more modern looking LiDAR enclosure on the top that gives it an overall height of just under 9 centimeters. The T8 has an array of front-facing sensors that Ecovac calls TrueDetect 3D. According to the documentation, it's supposed to help the vacuum avoid objects better than previous generations, but I couldn't see any real difference between the Kneebot and the T8 in terms of object detection. Though through the eyes of a security camera, the T8 looks much more futuristic and spaceship-like. That's probably not an important selection criteria, but it's worth noting. Because the T8 includes mopping, it needs a different setup for both its dustbin and dustbin emptying system. This also causes the bin size to be slightly smaller than the Kneebots, though as I said, this hopefully is less of an issue with an auto-empty base. The Ecovac's auto-empty base is quite a bit taller at 43 centimeters, and it comes with a clear attachment for the front to prevent drips on the floor if you're using the mopping feature. Like I said, there are actually 2 holes for dust extraction, which I initially thought would work by pushing air into one of the holes and then sucking air out of the other one. But it seems like both of them are for suction, and in my testing, the Ecovac's base is definitely more prone to clogging than the larger single opening on the Kneebot. This may be due to the smaller openings, lower overall suction of the base, or possibly even differences in the amount and type of dust that the vacuums are able to collect. I wasn't able to measure the exact suction power of either base, but the Ecovac's certainly sounds a lot less powerful. The bag size is basically identical on both vacuums, and Ecovac says it can hold up to 30 days of debris, which, as I said before, can be exceeded, but can definitely lead to issues like less dust extraction and eventually clogging of the robot's dustbin. And that leads me to performance. For me, the purpose of a robotic vacuum is not to throw it into a filthy home and then expect miracles, but instead they're best at keeping a clean home clean. I run my downstairs vacuum, which is currently the Ecovac's T8, simply because it's quieter both during operation and during emptying, every night at 1 a.m. And then I run my upstairs vacuum, the Kneebot Nomo, every day while my wife and I are at work and my daughter is at school. This frequent schedule stops dirt from getting ground into the carpet and allows the vacuum to keep the floors looking nice. With that said, for the sake of controlled testing, I started out each vacuum on a level playing field, giving the floors a thorough clean with my Dyson corded vacuum first. In this first round of testing, I ran each vacuum for exactly 30 days on my first floor of my house, which is about 70% carpet and 30% tile. Then I removed and labeled their dust collection bags for comparison. The results in this test were really surprising. The first thing that I noticed was the difference in the appearance of the 2 piles. The Kneebot pile looks more coarse and stringy, while the T8 is really dusty and has fine particles. This suggests that the T8 may be better at pulling particles out of the carpet, which has to do with brush design and how close the suction can get down to the carpet. The second thing that surprised me was how much more volume and mass was picked up by the T8 in the same 30-day period. The Kneebot was able to collect 49 grams of dust and debris compared to the 79 grams of the T8. I was impressed by the large objects that the Kneebot was able to not only pick up, but then also extract, but you can definitely tell that it cleans less dust and fine particles than the T8. As I mentioned, neither of the bags seemed particularly full after 30 days. So starting on January 26th, I placed a new bag in each vacuum and I ran the Kneebot 5 days a week upstairs and the Ecovac's T8 7 days a week downstairs. At the end of 30 days, I did a quick clean to the brushes and dumped any large debris that didn't get sucked out of the bins, which didn't have any clogs when I looked at them in February. On March 26th, 60 days later, I collected and labeled the dust collection bags, and here's what I found. The Kneebot collected 51 grams of dust and debris this time, only 2 grams more than the 30-day period, and the T8 just 84 grams, which is only 5 grams more than the 30-day period. In the case of the Kneebot, this could be explained by the fact that it sucked up a pretty heavy bracelet on the first test, and that increased the overall mass. But what about the T8? Upon further inspection, the dustbin appears to have gotten clogged sometime in the last 30 days of testing, and there was an additional 28 grams of dust and debris that was too impacted to remove by the auto-empty base. I'm not sure if this was caused by the bag being full or if one particular run produced so much dirt that the dustbin couldn't get emptied, but the bin was definitely clogged. The app does have a warning message that says to clean the dustbin and filter regularly, but that message gets displayed every 5 days no matter what, and it didn't tell me anything about the clog in the robot or the base. The vacuum bag contents were mostly the same as before, with the Kneebot having mostly large debris while the T8 had a lot of dust and fine particles. This is also consistent with the testing done on the Vacuum Wars channel that showed that the Kneebot struggled with deep cleaning and crevice pickup. As for brush tangles, the Kneebot had hair tangles throughout the entire brush, while the T8 tangles were concentrated into small bands, and neither were particularly difficult to remove with the included tools. As I mentioned before, I really like the design of the Kneebot brush. which disassembles at both sides for easier cleaning. But the T8 seemed to resist edge tangles completely, so I guess that works as well. Next, let's look at their software. The Kneebot app is surprisingly good for a newer company, and I definitely prefer it over the Ecovacs app. I did have a few issues with the Kneebot app crashing from time to time, but of all the vacuum apps that I've ever used, the Kneebot is the easiest to use with the most customization. Both robots generated an extremely accurate map during their first cleaning, and I was then able to add no-go lines and zones in order to keep them out of those troubled areas. Both vacuums had options to change their suction power and turn features on and off, but the Kneebot also had the option to change the frequency that the dustbin would be emptied. And selecting more under frequency causes it to empty after every cleaning. If the Ecovacs app offered this option, there's a good chance that you could avoid clogging completely. Moving on to scheduling, I like the interface of the Kneebot app slightly more, and my favorite feature is the ability to assign different cleaning types to different zones, meaning I can do a double pass on a high traffic zone and a single pass on the rest, and I can even skip different zones on different schedules. Overall, I like everything in the Kneebot app just a little bit more than the Ecovacs app. That is, when it works. Luckily, I never had to go into either of the apps very often, since both of these vacuums obey my first rule of robotic vacuums. Here are some additional considerations about these two vacuums. If you have an irregular schedule and you want to only trigger the vacuum cleaner when you're away for a certain amount of time, then the Ecovacs is going to offer you significantly more options for automating that behavior. Although the Kneebot has plans to allow for control via Amazon Echo devices, the app is currently the only way to start an unscheduled clean, while the Ecovacs T8 is compatible with Amazon Echo, Google Home, and Home Assistant via a custom integration. All vacuum cleaners have consumable parts, and these are no exception. Because Kneebot is a newer company, having continued access to those parts is also a concern. But as of right now, they're available on Amazon. But the problem is that because Kneebot is a smaller company, you're less likely to find generic options for those accessories like you would for Ecovacs vacuums. And the last large elephant in the room is that Kneebot is a pretty new company, and if they were to go out of business and you lost access to the app, it wouldn't be out of the question for you to lose all the ability to set up new maps and change your options. I did test out blocking the Kneebot from the internet, and it continues to follow its schedule and obey no-go lines, but you can't access the vacuum via the app or change any options without a cloud connection. Alright, so final verdict. It's pretty clear from my results that the Kneebot doesn't have the same amount of suction and pickup power as the Deebot, since it collected significantly less debris in the same time periods, and the debris was overall larger and less dust-like. Although I do have some concerns with Kneebot being a newer company, I have to say that their app interface and options seem to be better than Ecovacs, and overall I haven't had any issues with the vacuum after that firmware update in November. It's hard to say how much more improved suction is worth, and sometimes when these vacuums are on sale, the T8 only costs $50 more than the Kneebot. In which case, I'd certainly recommend the T8 to most people, simply because it has better dust collection. For their normal MSRP though, the T8 is $200 more than the Kneebot, which in that case, the Kneebot is a much better deal. And it does a great job keeping the floors clear of hair, sand, and debris. Either way, if you're coming from having no robotic vacuum cleaner at all, your mind is going to be blown by how clean your house feels on a daily basis. If you're coming from a non-LiDAR based navigation robot, you will be amazed by the increased reliability that comes from no-go lines and zones. And if you're upgrading your current LiDAR vacuum to an auto-empty base, you're going to love the fact that your weekly chore of emptying the bin multiple times is gone. Both of these vacuums are going to accomplish the most desirable outcome, which is to work while you're asleep or away and not only keep your floors clean, but also reduce the overall dust buildup in your house without you ever seeing them. As always, this is a completely non-sponsored review, and I do not and never will accept payments for product reviews. I do have affiliate links for both products down in the description, and if you use those links, I get a small percentage of the sale at no cost to you. Kneebot also sent me a stackable 10% off coupon for the Kneebot down in the description, which could potentially give you a crazy deal, but I have no idea how long it's going to be active for. Thank you so much to my awesome patrons over at Patreon for your continued support of my channel. If you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.